What happens when a man of God dies and leaves behind a secret powerful enough to destroy everything he spent a lifetime building? What happens when a pastor's final words expose hidden greed, family betrayal, and a conspiracy lurking inside the very church he loved? And what if the people mourning him are the very people he no longer? Bring you a story of faith, deception, family conflict, and shocking revelations. Before we begin, subscribe to Hidden Mind Tales, turn on notifications, and stay until the end because the final revelation changes everything. The town of Willow Creek had only known one spiritual leader for over 4 decades, Pastor Elijah Thompson. To the public, he was a symbol of faith. He baptized bobbies. He counseled troubled marriages. He visited the sick. He buried the dead. People trusted him with their deepest secrets. Children grew into adults hearing his sermons every Sunday morning. Many believed he was incapable of making mistakes, but every human being has burdens. Even pastors. And Pastor Elijah was carrying one that would eventually follow him to the grave. 3 weeks before his death, Pastor Elijah delivered a sermon unlike any he had ever preached. Members noticed something unusual. His voice trembled. His eyes seemed distant. And several times he paused, as if carefully choosing every word. "Not everyone who stands beside you stands with you," he said. The congregation exchanged puzzled glances. Then he continued. "There are wolves dressed as shepherds. There are smiles hiding sharp knives. And sometimes betrayal comes from those closest to us." The room fell silent. Nobody understood what he meant. At least not then. As the service ended, many assumed the pastor was simply tired. After all, he was 72 years old. Nobody imagined they have just heard his farewell message. 4 days later, tragedy struck. Pastor Elijah was found unconscious in his study. An ambulance rushed him to the hospital. Doctors fought to save him. Family members gathered. Church leaders prayed. The congregation waited anxiously for updates. But by sunrise, the news arrived. Pastor Elijah Thompson was dead. The town was devastated. Flowers covered the church entrance. People cried openly. Social media filled with tributes. The loss felt unbearable. Yet while everyone mourned, a few individuals quietly worried about something else. The pastor's will. Pastor Elijah left behind 2 children. David Thompson, age 45, and Rebecca Thompson, age 42. David had spent years positioning himself as his father's successor. He often preached when Elijah was unavailable. He attended leadership meetings. Many assumed he would eventually become senior pastor. David believed it too. Rebecca was different. Intelligent and independent, she had moved away years earlier. Though she loved her father, she often felt ignored by him. While David received public praise, Rebecca felt invisible. Old wounds remained unhealed. Now both siblings found themselves sitting together at the funeral. United in grief. Separated by resentment. The church was overflowing. Hundreds attended. Politicians, business owners, former members, friends, family. The choir sang emotional hymns. Tears flowed freely. One by one, speakers praised Pastor Elijah's legacy. Then David approached the podium. His voice cracked with emotion. "My father taught me everything I know." The congregation nodded. He dedicated his life to God and to this church. Applause followed. But in the third row, Rebecca noticed something strange. Several church board members exchanged nervous glances. Almost as if they were worried. Almost as if they feared what was coming next. 3 days later, family members and church leaders gathered inside a conference room. The church attorney entered carrying a thick envelope. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone expected a standard will. Instead, they received a shock. Pastor Elijah instructed that this document be opened only after his funeral. Attorney adjusted his glasses. Then he began reading. Several modest gifts were distributed, family heirlooms, savings accounts, personal belongings. Then came the surprise. The majority of Elijah's estate would be donated to a charitable foundation helping struggling families. The room exploded. David stood immediately. This must be a mistake. Rebecca stared in disbelief. The board members looked equally stunned. But the attorney wasn't finished. There was one final item, a sealed letter addressed to the church leadership. The room became silent. The attorney opened the letter. His expression changed instantly. The words were written in Pastor Elijah's own handwriting. "If you are hearing this letter, I am gone." Everyone listened carefully. "For months, I have discovered troubling evidence concerning church finances." A gasp filled the room. The attorney continued. "Someone entrusted with leadership has violated that trust." Faces turned pale. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. "I pray the truth is revealed, even if it causes temporary pain." The room erupted with confusion. Who was he talking about? What had he discovered? And why hadn't he exposed it while alive? Within hours, rumors spread. Church members whispered. Social media exploded. People speculated endlessly. The church treasurer became a suspect. Then the assistant pastor. Then several board members. Trust began to collapse. Attendance dropped. Offerings declined. Members argued. Friendships ended. The church that once symbolized unity now stood divided. And hidden among the chaos was someone desperately hoping the truth would never come out. While sorting through her father's belongings, Rebecca found an old wooden box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a leather journal. At the bottom lay another envelope. Unlike the first letter, this one was addressed specifically to her. Her hands trembled. She slowly opened it. Inside was a message. "Rebecca, if you have found this letter, it means events are unfolding exactly as I feared." Her heart raced. The letter contained directions, a location, a key, and a warning. Trust no one. Rebecca suddenly realized her father's death might not be the end of the story. It might only be the beginning. The following morning, Rebecca followed the instructions. They led her to an abandoned property her father had owned years earlier. Inside, she found a hidden room. Dust covered everything, but one object stood out. A locked cabinet. Using the key from the letter, she opened it. What she found inside changed everything. Financial records, bank statements, photographs, and documents exposing years of deception. The evidence pointed toward a conspiracy involving people nobody would suspect, including one person sitting at her father's funeral. A person everyone trusted. A person who appeared heartbroken by Elijah's death, but who had the most to lose if the truth emerged. Rebecca stared at the documents. Her hands shook. The evidence was undeniable. Someone had betrayed her father. Someone had stolen from the church. And someone was willing to do anything to keep the secret buried. Even if it meant destroying lives. Even if it meant silencing anyone who got too close to the truth. Who is the mysterious traitor? What exactly did Pastor Elijah discover? And was his death really as natural as everyone believed? Rebecca sat alone in the hidden room, staring at the stack of documents spread across the dusty table. The name she saw made her heart stop. It wasn't the church treasurer. It wasn't the assistant pastor. It wasn't any of the people being blamed. The name belonged to Samuel Carter, the chairman of the church board. For 20 years, Samuel had been one of Pastor Elijah's closest friends. He was respected, generous, and admired. The congregation trusted him completely. Yet the document told a different story. Large sums of money had been transferred through accounts connected to companies Samuel secretly controlled. The transaction stretched back nearly 7 years. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Rebecca couldn't believe it. Had her father's closest friend betrayed him? Or was someone trying to frame Samuel? As Rebecca left the abandoned property, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The engine was running. The windows were tinted. The vehicle slowly pulled away as she drove off. At first she dismissed it, but the same SUV appeared again near her apartment, then outside a grocery store, then near the church. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she had found the documents. Meanwhile, David was facing his own battle. Church attendance was dropping. Members' demands answer. Several influential families wanted David appointed as the new senior pastor immediately. Others opposed him. David secretly believed leadership belonged to him. After all, he had spent years preparing for the role. But Pastor Elijah had never officially endorsed him. That fact haunted him. The more pressure mounted, the more desperate David became. And desperation often leads people down dangerous paths. Back in her apartment, Rebecca continued searching through her father's journal. Hidden between 2 pages was another letter. This one contained a confession. Months before his death, Pastor Elijah had discovered irregularities in church finances. When he confronted Samuel privately, Samuel denied everything. But Elijah wasn't convinced. He hired a private investigator. The investigator uncovered enough evidence to raise serious concerns. Then suddenly, the investigator disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. Simply gone. Pastor Elijah became frightened. For the first time in his life, he feared someone within his inner circle. That evening, Rebecca received a mysterious phone call. A disguised voice spoke quietly. "If you want the truth about your father, meet me tonight." The line disconnected. Against her better judgment, she went. The meeting took place inside an old diner. A nervous man sat in the corner booth. His name was Mark Benson. He was the church's former accountant. Years earlier, he had resigned unexpectedly. Everyone assumed he had taken another job. The truth was far darker. Mark revealed he had discovered financial manipulation within church accounts. When he raised concerns, he received threats. His family became frightened. He resigned and left town. Now he had returned because Pastor Elijah was dead, and because his conscience could no longer stay silent. Mark slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything is on here." Rebecca stared at it. "What is it?" "Proof. Proof of hidden accounts. Proof of forged signatures. Proof of secret meetings. And one final revelation. Samuel Carter was not acting alone. There was another person involved. Someone much closer to Pastor Elijah. Someone inside the family. Rebecca froze. Could David be involved? The possibility seemed impossible. Yet the evidence pointed in his direction. As Rebecca returned home, she sensed danger. Her apartment door was slightly open. She never left it that way. Her pulse quickened. Inside, furniture was overturned. Drawers were emptied. Documents were scattered everywhere. Someone had searched the apartment, but they hadn't found the flash drive, because Rebecca had hidden it in her coat pocket. Then she noticed a message written on the wall. "Stop digging." For the first time, Rebecca realized her life might be in danger. Sunday arrived. The congregation gathered anxiously. Rumors had spread throughout town. Some defended Samuel. Others demanded his resignation. David attempted to calm the crowd. Instead, the meeting descended into chaos. Accusations flew, friendships shattered. Families argued. One elderly member stood and shouted, "We deserve the truth." The room erupted in applause. The church was unraveling before everyone's eye. That night, Rebecca confronted David. She showed him some of the documents. His reaction surprised her. Instead of anger, he looked terrified. Then he confessed. Years ago, Samuel had approached him with a proposal. A business investment. David invested money. The profits were enormous, too enormous. Eventually, David suspected something wasn't right. But by then he was trapped. Samuel possessed records that could ruin him. For years, David remained silent, not because he was guilty of stealing, but because he was afraid. As Rebecca processed David's confession, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. A familiar voice spoke. Rebecca nearly dropped the phone. It was the private investigator, the man everyone believed had disappeared, the man Pastor Elijah hired, and he had one shocking message. Your father wasn't investigating financial fraud anymore. Rebecca's heart pounded. What do you mean? The investigator paused. Then he said, he was investigating a murder. Rebecca sat frozen. A murder, the investigator confirmed it. 10 years earlier, a church employee named Michael Grant died in what authorities ruled an accident. His car crashed on a rainy night. The case was closed. Everyone moved on, except Pastor Elijah. Years later, he discovered evidence suggesting Michael had uncovered financial corruption shortly before his death. Then he died. The timing was too convenient. Rebecca tracked down Michael's widow. For a decade, she had lived quietly. She welcomed Rebecca cautiously. When Rebecca mentioned Pastor Elijah, tears filled the woman's eyes. She revealed something shocking. A week before Michael died, he told her he had uncovered something dangerous. He promised to expose it, but he never got the chance. His death silenced him forever, or so someone thought. Among Pastor Elijah's belongings, Rebecca discovered one final journal. The last pages were written shortly before his death. The entries revealed fear, not fear for himself, fear for his children, fear for the church, and fear that the truth might die with him. One sentence stood out. If anything happens to me, follow the money and follow the lies. Armed with overwhelming evidence, Rebecca arranged a meeting with church leaders. Samuel attended confidently. At first, then the documents appeared. The bank records, the shell companies, the hidden accounts. His face turned pale. The room fell silent. For years, Samuel had manipulated church funds through a complex network of fraudulent transactions. The evidence was undeniable. His empire was collapsing. But Samuel wasn't the mastermind. As investigators dug deeper, another name emerged. A wealthy businessman named Victor Langston. For years, he donated generously to the church. People admired him. Nobody suspected him. Yet Victor used the church's financial structure to hide illegal activities. Samuel became his willing partner. Together, they built a system based on greed and deception. And Michael Grant had discovered it. Cornered by investigators, Samuel finally broke. He confessed everything. The fraud, the cover-ups, the threats, and the event that haunted him most: Michael's death. Although Samuel insisted he never intended for Michael to die, he admitted actions were taken to stop Michael from exposing the scheme. The accident had not been an accident. Pastor Elijah's suspicions were correct. Rebecca eventually learned the most heartbreaking truth. Pastor Elijah knew his investigation placed him in danger. Yet he continued. Not because he wanted revenge. Not because he wanted headlines. But because he believed truth mattered. He prepared letters, gathered evidence, created backup copies, and left clues for Rebecca. Even in death, he continued fighting for justice. Months later, the church slowly began healing. New leadership was appointed. Financial transparency was introduced. Attendance gradually returned. Trust was rebuilt. Not overnight, but step by step. The congregation learned an important lesson. Faith should never be placed entirely in human beings. Because humans can fail, faith belongs in God alone. David publicly confessed his mistakes. Though he had not participated in the fraud, he admitted remaining silent out of fear. The congregation forgave him. His relationship with Rebekah improved. For the first time in years, they truly became family again. The wounds left by their father's death slowly began to heal. 1 year later, the charitable foundation named in Pastor Elijah's will opened its doors. Families received help. Children received scholarships. Struggling parents found support. The foundation became a living testimony to Elijah's values, not wealth, not power, not influence, but service. His final act transformed countless lives. Pastor Elijah Thompson never lived to see the truth revealed. But because he chose courage over comfort, darkness was exposed. Because he chose integrity over silence, justice prevailed. And because he trusted that truth would eventually rise, his legacy survived. The pastor's will was never really about money. It was about truth. It was about faith. And it was about the hidden minds that exist in every human heart. And remember, sometimes the greatest battles are not fought in public. They are fought in secret, inside the human hearts.